In this video, we'll look at calculating the length of what's called a tour of certain cities given input is a distance matrix. In this case, we have the distance matrix that I've entered in to Excel here with the distances between these respective cities, and of course along the diagonal we have zeros because a city is 0 miles from itself. And suppose in this case we wanted to calculate the total distance of a round-trip tour starting in Chicago, then going to Los Angeles, back over to Philadelphia, and then back to Chicago. I'm going to show you how you can do this using Microsoft Excel, and hopefully that'll give you an idea for the overall structure of the problem. We'll start by taking our input tour and listing that as a set of from cities. We'll then add to a matrix down below the to city, which is effectively going to be the from column shifted by 1. And so if you want to see this in Excel, we can just simply copy the cities in here and then shift them by 1. So in this case, from Chicago, we're going to go to Los Angeles. And then from Los Angeles, we'll go to Philadelphia. And then from Philadelphia, we will go back to Chicago. And so if you look closely, you can see that this to column is essentially the from column shifted up by 1. And so this gives us the two legs of, the two endpoints of each leg of our trip. Now we'll add into our matrix a distance column, and this column will need to use a couple of Excel functions called index and match to find the respective distance in the distance matrix up above. So just follow along while I type in the formula here. We'll start by using the index function, which looks up two values in a matrix-like structure. Excel calls an array. The matrix that we want to look them up in is our distance matrix up above, and no need to select the labels in this case. However, because we'll want this matrix to remain constant in our formula, as we drag it around, we'll make this an absolute reference. And if you don't know how to do that, it's F4 on your keyboard, and that will insert dollar signs. And what that means is as we drag the formula down in our matrix below, it'll keep the reference to that array constant. Next, in the index parameters, we need to find both the row and the column that we are looking for. And to find these, we're going to use Excel's match function. Our first parameter, we'll look up the row number using a match function. So in this case, we'll look up the from city, which is Chicago, and we'll look that up in the array, which is on the left-hand side of our matrix here, that has the various cities in it. Once again, we'll want this array to remain constant, so before we close out the formula, I'll hit F4 on the keyboard, and you can see that makes that an absolute reference in Excel with the dollar signs. Then, in order to look up the column for our distance, we'll use another match function. This time we'll look up, the to city, and we will do that in our top row of labels here on the distance matrix. And once again, before we close out this formula, I'm going to hit F4 to make that an absolute reference, and that will allow us to drag it down our matrix in just a minute. Once we're done with that, we can close off both of those so you can see the full formula here. And as we hit enter, I'll just double check. From Chicago to Los Angeles, I'll double check the distance matrix from Chicago to Los Angeles, 2,054 miles. I'll go ahead and drag this formula down to the other two legs on our tour, and you can see we'll double check Los Angeles to Philadelphia is 2706, and that matches, and then finally Philadelphia to Chicago, 738, and that's a match. So it looks like our formula is working correctly. The last part of this problem is to get a total distance, and hopefully you can see by now, having done all the setup work, getting the total distance is simply a matter of summing up what we've looked up in our distance column. And so we get 5,498 miles, and we can label that. So in this video we looked at calculating the length of a tour using Microsoft Excel with a distance matrix as an input, and hopefully this video gives you some insight into the structure of this particular problem.